Well, it's one with an academic, if you like, a Pan-Africanist, and a woman who has been Deputy Minister of Higher Education in this country before. And it's an interaction on education, on the state of the Esi Sutherland Park, among other matters germane to our national life. We had a conversation with Professor Esi Sutherland-Addy, and we're glad to give it to you now. We're somewhere in a beautiful environment nestled in Jowulu, and it's a conversation with someone who is a stalwart when it comes to African culture. She's an activist. She also happens to be an academic. She currently is a professor at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. She has served as Deputy Minister for Education and Culture in charge of higher education in Ghana between the years 1986 and 1993. It's a conversation we're having on education, on parks, and there's a park that we'll be talking about shortly. We're also talking about our national life, the economy, corruption, now that we have that latest report from the Afro Barometer, among other matters of national scope. I'm having an interaction with none other than Professor Esi Sutherland-Addy. Prof, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure having you. It's been a while, but even as we find ourselves here, even within this premises, you have a beautiful park. I don't know how that reflects your growing up and all of that, but how long has this park been in existence?
Well, the park has been in existence since 2012, around 2012. But that piece of land is part of the land that was acquired by my mother, Esi Sutherland, in the late 1950s. And so we had the run of the place when we were small. We used to make our own, play things like go and set up a high jump, go and cut some tree branches and put it there and have races up and down because there was a lot of space. And
it's obvious you have swathes of land here. It's such a big space.
Yes, and so we had a wonderful childhood. My brother Ralph Sutherland and my sister Moe Sutherland Phillips and I, and our cousins and so on. So this was sort of the fulcrum, of our generation, and and our grandaunt would come and outdoors and she would make tatale and aboboy, and then we'll all sit down on the ground and eat it and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
What was it like? I mean, let's talk about the making of Esi Sutherland. What was it like growing up?
Well, I grew up, in with an understanding that you had to be modest. So we had a modest but very happy upbringing.
Right.
And we also learned how to share. There were always people here from villages. My mother used to she believed in learning from the people in the rural area, so she might have her research, somebody coming here to tell stories or to do some drumming. She had people doing rehearsals here and so on. So we also had exposure to the arts very early in life, and so throughout my schooling, I was always in a drama or dance group or something like that. All the way to when I went to university in the United States for my master's. I joined a group led by some Ghanaian, maestros, the Lajipo brothers,
right,
who were there. So I had, and also, had quite a strict upbringing. Kindly strict. I mean, so if our mom was somebody that insisted that you do your work you know, if you have to sweep, you must sweep before you go, and if you don't do your work well, you might find her coming to tell the teacher. It happened to me once. Tell the teacher that I had to come back home because I didn't wipe the bathroom properly, and I had to come and do it and go back. But she taught us a great deal about being cosmopolitan and aware, you know, African people. So we also had the pleasure of having many different people coming through who are, you know, who eventually ended up being luminaries, you know, so quite a few writers, politicians from all over the world. And our father was a Pan-Africanist activist. So
I was about to ask where the Pan-Africanism came in. So you took part of it from your father?
Part
basically.
of it from our father, yes.
And the people you met?
And the people we met. So, you know, there were, you know, Maya Angelou, somebody called Julian Mayfield, we had Julius Nyerere, we had various people coming through the house all the time. And so, you know, that certainly, you know, being flies on the wall, we were able to pick up on some of the conversations and then develop them later when we grew up, yes. Yeah.
So quite the influence in there, and obviously it has shaped whom you have become.
Yes.
But let's move from there and talk about maybe the legacy of your mom.
Okay.
Ifwa Sutherland.
Yes.
And one of the things that stand out, the Accra Children's Park,
yes,
which, you know, was started somewhat 44 years ago, eventually renamed the Ifwa Sutherland Park.
Yes.
In recent times, we got to hear of the state of it. It's basically in a decrepit situation.
Yes.
Very sad. And for someone like me, I have looked at the park and felt if I had the wherewithal, I would, looking at the environment in which it is located, you have major hotels, Kempinski, Movenpick, the Accra City Hotel. This is something we can transform into a very lucrative touristic, you know, scene, give fun to the children, but also make some very good earnings out of it. As a child, I went there, and now you look at it, and it's a far cry from what it used to be.
Yeah.
It was also splashed onto the front page of the Daily Graphic recently.
Yes, yes.
What do you think about the Ifwa Sutherland Park now, named after your mother, and how it's been left to just, so to speak, rot away?
This is an important question. I think I would like to say that for many years, when the park was named after her, our family did a concept note and sent it to the authorities to try and show what her vision was. Knowing that, you know, while she was in charge of the National Commission on Children, which is now the Children's Department of the Ministry of Gender, it was a vibrant place programmatically. You know, it had drama programs there, it had a mobile library, a mobile science lab. It had on the opposite side of the road was a Ghana Drama Studio where, right, you know, where the National Theatre is today. So there was a certain synergy, and many people, of course, had programs there all the time. And it was supposed to be the national anchor, but then also emanating from there, she actually established parks, different types of parks, one in Teshinungwa Estate, which is also in Palace State, Chichire, Gomoasin, and even in Kumasi, you know, Amakum, there's a huge park there that has now become a den of thieves and drug users. And
it appears we don't really see the use for these parks.
This is it.
I mean, you go to other jurisdictions, and these are places where people sometimes even just go to find peace,
Yes.
while away time. Others go to, and especially for young people, you would see that people go to sometimes skate and do all of these things. Keeps them away from maybe dealing drugs and all
Doing
kinds
other
of
things,
engaging
yes.
in other
Yes.
activities that you wouldn't. But here, we use them for other things if they are not even sold out.
Well, you see, that the thing is that we have engaged with various the ministries and the various regimes to try and get them to see the park from a different point of view. It's not a cheap thing to look after, you know, and therefore I think that governments over time have been searching for a way, you know, to make sure that there's a consistent sustainability, you know, kind of plan. So we have, there have been many instances in which, you know, people have offered to do a number of things that are not suitable. It's not a place for you to bring in Ferris wheels and so on and to turn it into a
kind of circus?
Yes, but when you do that, a theme park,
right.
Bring in your Donald Ducks and so on and so forth, it just goes against the spirit of the place. That sort of thing needs to be out of town, maybe at the say in La, and so on. So it is.
So the thinking has been different about what to do with places like the Esi Sutherland Park.
Right. So so in the meantime, there hasn't been enough effort to put the right people in charge. And to conceptualize the park differently. So when you get there, the gates, you enter it and you don't even know where to go. Right. The people who work there are not oriented towards welcoming people to come and use the park as a park. You know, they're usually busy trying to run people off the place. So you have that management issue. And then you have the issue of, perhaps not thinking about a completely sort of innovative way of bringing other people on board. You mentioned the various hotels. We've had projects in which we've tried to put together, some suggestions about how to create a board for the park,
right?
That does not have to. The ministry can have people on the board.
Under which, so maybe Parks and Gardens, does it fall under the tourism ministry? I mean, I guess that is part of the problem. Sometimes you don't even know what falls under, and
yes.
So do you have any idea?
Right. So. What has happened is that because the Children's Commission became the Children's Department of the Ministry of Gender, Children and Social Protection, that ministry has the primary role of taking care of the park. However, it doesn't have the resources. So the Ministry of Tourism, Arts and Culture has been invited, from my understanding, to support the park by, raising, some kind of partnerships and resources to get the park going. And the Parks and Gardens sometimes lays claim to it and so on. So there's a jurisdictional, sort of clash also, I think. That has to be taken care of.
Do you, Prof, have a say in any of this? After all, it bears the name of your mother. Do you have a say in anything that is happening? When you speak, do they listen? And how does it make you feel that this is what your mom has been named after, and it's in shambles, basically?
Well, we don't feel good about it. Definitely not. And I have to say that we have been politely listened to a number of times, and I think that without, making it public, there have been some moments in which the park was almost going to be built on, by various entities. And we've been able to get in there and say, look, this is just not on, and I think that And
what do you say? It was almost going to be built on. They were going to do what?
Offices.
They were going to raise it down and turn it into office blocks.
Yes, and leave a couple of acres for a small bit for children. And
how long ago was this?
Maybe 6 or so years, 6, 7 years ago.
6, 7 years ago.
About 6 years. So they were going to actually take the park and her name to the Achimota Forest, and we just said, we're not playing ball on this one. But interestingly, everybody who was supposed to have been involved in this, when questioned by the presidency, they all denied flatly that they were going to do it.
Wow.
So but it was just, we were like...
So the presidency then had to intervene.
Yeah.
And those who were going to do this claimed no knowledge of...
They backed off and said, oh, no, we weren't going to do it, but we had documentation, that had come to us. And this has happened, there have been other near misses. So it's very important for the park to be incorporated, to have legislation that sort of makes it a park in perpetuity in law. There has to be that, so that it's not just convention. It really has to happen. And then we have to have a board that that involves the public sector, the private sector, and the suitable NGOs and so on who know what to do with these things, and just form, oversee the development of the park. We've made suggestions about doing it in a step-by-step fashion, starting with just ensuring that we get the buy-in of these corporate bodies around the park, including EcoBank and CD House. There's like...
Right.
Yeah.
MTN, they're all in that space. Get
them on board to just do a minimal change. Just seats there, playthings, equipment there, programming. So that every time you go there, there might be an artist, doing some artwork. The National Theatre might be rehearsing in the park.
What has the response been like?
We're waiting. We've been assured that it's being. This particular iteration, it's about, let's see, so much. So it's about 3-4 months. So we're hoping that reason will be seen, and we can start small so that we don't have an overwhelming situation where, because we can't do everything, therefore we don't do anything. So that's the situation. But it is, we've got. There are lots of people who are incensed by the state of the park. So we formed, sort of a coalition of people who will stand up for the park, and we're hoping that will also put some, pressure, on the.
How many? Just to end on that subject. How many are you in this coalition?
I would say that there are, if you take organizations, maybe 8 or 9, but we've got several individuals. So we went online and did a petition, and there were almost 5,000 people registering for the petition. So so we're
that shows
the
groundswell of a movement, if you like, of people saying we can't keep doing this.
That's right.
And obviously we all know the usefulness of parks, but it appears in our part of the world not much attention is paid to them.
But I have to use this opportunity to thank Joy FM for in March advertising what we called a family day, where we brought people who were interested in the park, and we had thousands of people there, really. So I want to thank Joy FM for doing some of the publicity for us. Thank you.
Let's talk education. As we talk about children and everything, the next thing obviously is education. You've been Deputy Minister for Education for quite a number of years. When you look at our educational system now, from the basic level to the tertiary level,
right,
what do you see?
So let me just say that people will look at me and say, but you were part of the, the regime that changed the system, and some people
because you
feel
served under the
86,
PNDC
right,
into the NDC era.
I wasn't a member. I mean, I left when the change was.
So in '93, so right at the changeover.
At the transition,
you left. Right.
That's right, exactly. So I have to say that there have been great achievements, and then we've also had reversals. So some of the achievements have been just raising the level of participation of children, so that the gross enrollment ratios have been going up, and so we have to say that Ghana does have a high enrollment, and I'm particularly interested in girls, that getting a balance or equity between girls and boys, and that has been working and going up the ladder through the system. There has been an attempt to make sure that all children have at least 9 years of education. That was the original idea. And now that all children have 12 years of education, 12, 13 years of education. And that idea that way you don't have people going into the workforce that are uneducated. And if you want to develop, you have to have people who are trainable, and so on and so forth. So those are the ideas that have been behind some of the changes that went into the system. However, the distortions have also been there. And
we've done 3-year system, 4-year system, back to 3-year system,
right,
and a whole lot of other changes.
And also we've had a situation where we've wanted to do more STEM, by giving even some technical exposure to technical education in at junior high school. Remember all of that. Okay, so the distortions have arisen because we have not synchronized between making sure we have the teachers, making sure that we have the infrastructure, making sure that we have the equipment, and doing it on a consistent basis. And I would say that part of the reason is this short-term 4-year, 3-year sort of fixation by people in the political class, so that, instead of having a long vision, and you can't do education unless you have a long vision, instead of having that and letting a system mature, you then come in and change it because a regime has changed. This has been one of the real problems that we've had, so that you don't consistently, you can't say, okay, you know what, because we can't do everything right now, let's have one model, senior high school in each district, and then we'll move to the next districts. But because everybody wants to make an impact as far as elections are concerned, then they kind of start everything at once, and then
everything becomes haphazard.
And then they're condemning each other for having started this or done that. That is a real problem.
Right.
A very, very serious problem. Another problem, I think, is to do with confronting the issue of how you fund education.
Right.
I was privileged to be on a team of people who wrote a paper, and it was there were people from the National Development Planning Commission, from higher education, from all over. And a paper was developed around the question of financing education. It was very clear to this committee that by looking at how much it costs to train a primary school person, a junior high school person, a secondary school person, a tertiary person, a technical, and so on, all of those things were costed. And it became clear that if we wanted to jump into making everything free at once, it would go beyond, you know, to sort of eat up about 50% of our GDP.
Wow.
Even though, you know, Ghana had a very good reputation, you know, for spending about 5 or 6% of GDP on education. So how were we going to get, you know, create a just and fair system, and at the same time make sure that it doesn't run us into the ground? I have to say that the minister who commissioned this document felt that we couldn't put it out in the public because it would be, you know, it would spark a lot of controversy. But I think it should go out. Actually, I think that we should.
So up till now,
not publicly.
This report has not been.
No,
published.
but I mean, I can send you a copy if you want. But it's
How many years ago are we looking?
This is 2008, 2009.
2008, 2009.
Yeah.
Right.
So those are some of the things. So, you know, education is a costly affair, and it is important to look at all the stakeholders and try and see how, you know, there could be a synergy between all the stakeholders. So I remember, for example, for higher education, we had suggested that even if government took 70%, there should be, students should contribute about 10%, and the corporate world should be encouraged to invest in education, and then
social responsibility.
Yes, and then the internally generated funds 10%, something like that, would begin to get us to understand that we must work together with respect to education.
Speaking of working together, there were instances under Nkrumah where, I mean, people benefited from, you know, very good education. The state sponsored a lot of, you know, parents, grandparents, and others to study in different places. Russia, Germany, the West. All those times, you know, people in school would tell you that back then in my own former hall of residence, Commonwealth Hall, they would get to eat so well and all of that. All of that.
Snacks a day.
Right. All of that has changed. But in terms of free education, which on which tangent you started, I might as well feed in free SHS.
Yes.
What do you make of it, especially in recent times, looking at our economic downturn?
Yes.
People have said, you know what? We may have our own problems, but we're not ready for something like this in terms of bearing the full brunt of all the costs. Feeding, you know, tuition and all of that. Let's take it bit by bit. And let's be progressive with it. Let's let parents, for example, what we feel they can pay, let them pay for it. And over time, we can gradually ease into a wholesale thing. But we've done the wholesale. And now people have said, on the back of our economic woes, we should rethink free SHS. Academics have said it, economists have said it, educationists have said it. What do you say?
What I say, and I'm sorry to sort of go back a little bit, but what I would say is this. We had a system where you would be there as a student, and then you would get a letter that said that you had gained a bursary because you did well in Form 1 or whatever it is, or you did well in the common entrance and so on. And you wouldn't even know how it happened. And I long for those days where there would be, you know, people would be honest brokers, identify people who are economically challenged and give them the support that they require, you know, so that it works into our decentralized system, and you have a decentralized system where you can count on the districts and so on and regions to bring you a crop of students that, you know, that deserved, you know.
Everything has changed nowadays. It depends on whom you know and all of that.
Right. Does it have to be like that? I mean, can we not, are we going to, you know, sort of go into our graves saying that we are intrinsically dishonest? I mean, that for me is a problem, because I'm sure that we can do something about it along those lines. That's one. The second thing that I would say is that you'd see that in the Constitution, education is supposed to be progressively free. It's not an sometimes this thing is looked at. I want to say that I can't stand, partisanship along, with as important a thing as education. So I don't want to be read as being partisan, but as being a nationalist and looking at the situation, confronting it. And in that sense, I would say that, there are a number of things that we need to think of. One of them is, do we really have to have boarding for every single child? Boarding institutions were set up because children had to come from far distances to schools and so on. That if you try and add boarding and lodging to the business of education, which is teaching and learning and providing students with the equipment and so on that they need to do well in school, the teachers being paid well and so on. If we could take care of that, is it really true that we students couldn't stay home and go to school? Bring school closer to them. I remember that people used to say, "Kobewo," that sort of thing. But I'm sure we would have gotten over it, if we give the right incentives and so on. So it's a combination of things where you show, maybe by providing day schools with everything that they need, that it's a good school. You go there, you pass well, and you go on, into tertiary or into, technical education, whatever. So I'm saying that I cannot see how we can afford this. People have said that perhaps...
You don't see how we can afford this. We've pumped quite a lot into free SHS, many billions over the last few years. But would you say it has reaped for us the results that we would have wanted to see?
We've got the numbers. So in terms of access, it's been tremendous. Now, but what the young people go through while they are in school, and there's been some... people have tried to say that they did very well in the WACC, BEC, and the
so the placement system
and all that. I mean, there's been some anxiety to score points, in terms of, they do well and so on. But we know that is a problem. And you have a situation where people who are working in the system feel stifled about talking about what the problems really are. We've got to open it. It's like a festering sore. You've got to open it,
right,
and say, look, these are the difficulties. And so what can we do about it?
What are the difficulties that you see in this respect, that you've been told of, that you've seen yourself? I mean, in recent times, we've had to grapple with children in school not having, food to eat.
Right.
We've had some of them talk about the fact that they don't have the necessary bursaries available so they can engage in certain competitions and all of that. So,
right.
So many, it's a pot of issues that we've had to deal with. The buffer stock, not having the funding needed to also give the schools the food, then suppliers under-supplying because they are owed so much. It's quite a raft of issues.
Yes, and also the idea was that in a region or a district, certain food items would come from there. I'm not sure that centralizing things in such a way that we're depending, say, on a mass importation of mackerel or sardines, or turning the buffer stock into a narrow, an institution with a narrow set of suppliers who are also sort of, outsourcing the thing, to abroad and so on. I think that is. I think that's really problematic, because we can't make it if that goes on. The second thing that worries me is that classrooms are crammed. hostels or halls of residence are crammed. And for me, girls again, or you have girls staying in hostels, and it's that business of what about the other side of the life of the children, their social life, toilets, etc. Those are problematic. And I think that has to be looked at. But I'm not one to say that it's bad. That's not what it's about. It's about how can we make it work.
Exactly.
Yes, how can we make it work? So it has to be opened up for discussion. It really does.
So a review is needed.
I think so. I think a review is needed. Even if you were to even want to continue, how would you do it? And I think that serious-minded, well-trained, experienced people should sit around the table and say, look, this is it. It's not about, putting it, sort of out there and people, shouting about it. You have to get into a room, put your heads together and see, and from all, people not do it on the basis of any partisanship, but just,
right.
and just see what can be done,
I want us to stay briefly, maybe for the next minute and a half on education.
Okay.
You teach at the tertiary level.
Yes, I do.
Basically. It's also been said that a lot of what we produce from even the finest universities in this country don't make the cut when it comes to the real community of work.
Right.
When it comes to, it's almost as though we learned by rote. It's chew, pour, pass, and forget.
Yes.
Not practical teaching that builds a person for life, basically, but just academic. And so sometimes we go out there and we do not thrive, or we do not even fit into the spaces that are available. Very quickly on that, before we get into governance and corruption.
Okay, well,
what is your take?
I'll be quick about it. I don't think that you can make a blanket statement like that. I first of all, I'm not a person who believes that a university is a technical training ground, for you. You are supposed to learn how to learn. You are supposed to learn to be teachable when you go out. And and the countries we compare ourselves to, they give people a grounding when they go into their institutions. So I mean, I have a worry about making a blanket statement, although I do accept that because of the numbers, sometimes it's difficult for you to reach a student. I'm lucky because I deal a lot with graduate students, so that interaction is there and you can impact them. But at the undergraduate level, sometimes it's overwhelming for lecturers, and the other thing is trying to get the students not to just go to classes, but also all the myriad of lecture series and various activities that are going on. We have to get them to get themselves involved in those things, even in student politics or whatever, although it now has a different color. But all of those activities is what really builds you up. So I'm if I have a worry, it's a worry about also the narrowness of student interests. You can't get Ghanaian students to go on a demonstration, because of the Sahrawi Arab Republic, or because of, what I mean. So we have those difficulties, and if there were time, we could talk about them. But I would accept that we have a much greater potential to impact on our students than we are doing at the moment.
Since you brought that up, another minute, if we can, on industrial actions.
Right.
Recently we saw the senior groups of the universities embarking on a strike. Before that, UTAG generally had embarked on a strike. How do you feel about that? I was listening to an engagement on the BBC concerning Nigeria. It is rampant there.
At the moment.
And that started the movement for a lot of people to come to Ghana.
Right,
then.
right.
In a minute, what is your reflection on that? What more can be done to forestall such actions?
So I have a feeling that our politicians should not run away from dialoguing with the constituencies that that are under them. They have to. They have to keep a dialogue up. This is a constituency that it has some of your best brains. So you also need to make sure that you behave in a way that makes them feel that they can also sacrifice. And there's that is one of the things that is underlying some of the unrest that you are seeing, that people feel that they are being sacrificed. And they're being asked to sacrifice when the people who are asking them to do so are not willing to sacrifice. That is one of the underlying sort of thoughts processes that leads to this unrest. But it's also a question of how can you set up the system so that it works? So if you're supposed to give, a certain percentage of taxation to certain, like to higher education, and you do it in such a way that it's equitable, and you make that money go to them, then they know that, look, we're supposed to get 2%. We've got our 2%. Maybe now, so then it removes that business of it looking as if, they're just being, tossed pennies and so on. So there's got to be we have to be systematic about how we distribute the funds. Make sure that people are aware this is the cake, this is how we're going to distribute it, and stick by it. Right. Yeah.
Let's talk governance.
Right.
And corruption.
Right.
They seem to, unfortunately, in our country, go hand in hand or hand in glove.
Right.
How would you rate the governance of this current administration over the last, it's almost 6 years out of the 8-year tenure, because they won elections again in 2020. There have been a number of reports in recent times that paint a very gloomy picture.
Yeah.
There's the recent Shraj report, commissioned by Shraj, worked on by the Ghana Statistical Service and the UNODC with funding.
Yes.
It paints a very gloomy picture when it comes to governance structures, when it comes to institutions, public institutions, and corruption. Then, very recently, we have another report, the Afrobarometer CDD report.
Right.
In fact, it puts the presidency as the second most corrupt public institution, only beneath the Ghana Police Service. Interesting, because the three arms of government are in second, third, and fourth position.
Yes.
Presidency in second slot,
Police
most corrupt.
First.
Police first. Third is the MPs, the legislature. Fourth is the judiciary. There's also the angle of that report saying that this tenure under Akufo-Addo has been the worst in 20 years. What is your reflection on that?
We're talking about perceptions. I would be loath to look at things from that angle. It's as if you are a little corrupt, you are better than somebody who is more corrupt. And if there's corruption, and I think that we would find it in every regime to a greater or a lesser extent. So I don't. Because I don't have the proof and so on, it would be very difficult for me to make that kind of categorical statement. What I would want
but the issue here is, I get your point.
Right.
The Shraj report was not perception. It was reality.
It was reality.
It's the first we've had that moves away from perception and goes into the fray of reality. So we can take that aside.
Yes.
This latest one, of course, we know about, this is the 9th round of Afrobarometer surveys, not just in Ghana, across the continent.
Right.
But when the perception from different surveys, time and again, point in a certain direction. They say there's no smoke without fire.
Right.
So maybe we can look at it from that angle.
Right. Okay. So what I would say is that my worry is that people who are in this current government, especially, one can point out to many erudite, well-trained, exposed people who have been exposed to the rest of the world, and who should be able to see, when the hammer is falling, that certain things have got to be curtailed. Certain institutions have got to be strengthened. And my feeling or my instinct is that not enough work has been done to hold institutions to the work that they are supposed to do, to get them to act in a disciplined manner.
Have we done enough to fight corruption?
No, that's what I'm saying. It's not, I feel that you're sort of singling out the president and saying that, okay, he has to go and stop corruption in all these places.
Of course, there are institutions.
No, there are institutions. People are in charge of those institutions. People are working under them, and so we have a hierarchy and all that. So you can pinpoint.
But sometimes people will also go to him because they would say, okay, so we have an office of the special prosecutor, but you don't set up the board after 10 months.
Right.
You do this. You don't give them logistics. They don't have the proper funding and all of that.
Right.
You can put pen to paper and get some of these things done. When they are not done, then there are questions to be asked.
So what I would answer to that is this. We've got a system, right? And we've got to make sure that we try to work across the system. Having some spectacular person being caught and so on. One of the things that worries me, for example, is that when the Auditor General goes, to make a presentation to Parliament, and people are seen to have, embezzled or allowed certain, what do you call it, mismanagement of funds and so on. Why is it that whether they are retired or not, why don't we, get them and get them to go through what they need to go through, both pay back the money and take the punishment, so that people will understand that you cannot get away with this.
I guess we've not made it a high-risk business enough.
That's what I'm saying. It has to be a high-risk business. And I really feel very strongly that those of us who have been working in the public service for our whole lives, it's painful to have a perception that all of us are corruptible, and that we cannot, do our work without being corrupt and so on and so forth. We need to do something to make people realize that if you don't do what you're supposed to do, you're going to get it. Okay, so I think that, fine, let's deal with the politicians, but let's now look at making systems work.
Systems should work.
Yeah.
My very final bit to you as we wrap this conversation, and maybe you can add your final reflections.
Right.
Recently, we've had cause, especially as we're going to the IMF, to look at our number of ministers. We have over 100 of them. Some people have said, in my recent interaction with, was it Professor Bokpin of the Economics Department at Legon?
Yes.
He made mention of the fact that if we cut them to under 60, we could save about 3 billion Ghana cedis.
Right.
Now, if you look at what we're hoping to get from the e-levy, that is substantial.
Right.
Are you of the school of thought that we can reduce or should reduce the number of ministers, the drain on the public coffers, and that we can bring it down to maybe as low as 19 as some of profit? Even the majority leader made mention of that recently. What do you think about that?
So what I think about it is this. Having been in a government at a time when it wanted to do so much, you find that you can be short of hands if you're not careful. Right, but it's not necessarily at the level of the ministers. It's at the level of the support systems that you have. The senior technical people need to be trained to make sure that they can get things done, and you do the supervision and so on. So we certainly don't need the numbers that there are, and it creeps up because people have aides and they have special assistants, and they have it's in there, that you begin to get the problem because you have to pay all of them, So that's an issue. Second thing is some of the habits that they have developed. You go to a function, you are there for 2 hours, and the driver of the person, some of the people, is in the car with the engine running and the air conditioning on for the whole time.
Yes.
And I'm thinking it's a small thing, but can't we do something about that? Is that something? What does that cost? You know, what does that cost? 10 of them.
They'll tell you it's for security reasons, so that if there's
goodness.
anything, how many people have been attacked, so to speak, or whatever.
Yeah, so there's that sort of thing. There are entourages and you know, people who
20 vehicles and all
exactly,
of that with one
or
person.
people you going abroad and you take I don't know how many people and so on and so forth. I mean, if we look into our practices, you know, as people who are in charge of or are seen to be, you know, in charge of various or have various responsibilities that are supposed to be at a higher level, and how we perceive what we are supposed to do, I mean, what we are entitled to. So there are these entitlement issues that have to be in.
Right.
But I think my real worry is that all of this corrupts all of us. So if I'm an ordinary person and you are my MP, you come, and I feel that the only thing I can get out of you is for you to come and spend money at my naming ceremony of my child, or you have to come to my funeral, or you have to, you know, and we start making those kinds of demands on people. And it's not from now. Let me tell you, when I was a minister, you know, there were people who used to tell me that why was I wearing batik? And that it was not, you know,
ministerial.
Yes, it didn't. Yeah, so I should, and you know, I should. You know what I mean? There's a certain perception that people have, but it translates into action. You must wear a certain type of material. You must do this. You must do that. And where society is slowly becoming. Corruption is becoming a norm in what we demand from our leaders and in how we think people should behave. And if we don't do something, I mean, I think that's the tragedy.
Right.
Yes, that's the tragedy, is to have a fabric of society that doesn't hold our leaders to account, but rather condones, you know, what they're doing. So that's my worry, you know.
I guess you nailed it finally on the head. It's a societal problem, and together we must address it, because they will always tell you leaders are a reflection of the rest of us in society.
Yes.
But thank you so much, Prof, for engaging us and for the refreshing thoughts that you've shared on these crucial matters of national life. And we wish you the very best.
Thank you for asking me. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm.
That has been our interaction with Professor Esi Sutherland-Addy, a former Deputy Minister of Education, Higher Education and Culture, and of course an academic, currently Professor at the Institute of African Studies at the University of Ghana. For those of you who took the time to watch, thank you.